Welcome to the Revitalize Portland Coalition's Revive and Thrive podcast. My name is Michael Hironimus, board member here at RPC. Today we've got a great topic. We'll be talking to Vadim Mozyrsky, going over a variety of topics, including Vadim's background and experience, crime and safety, homelessness, and the current state of the Board of Commissioners. We've got a lot to discuss, so let's get to it. Vadim, welcome to Revitalize Portland Coalition's Revive and Thrive podcast. So glad to have you here. You've been a part of the Revitalize Portland Coalition for a while now, and so a lot of our members know who you are. But is there something you could tell us about your background and how you got to this position?
Yeah, and I think that's pretty important because it's sort of the story from my perspective of Portland. I had heard about Portland for a long time. I come from an immigrant family. We were refugees from the Ukraine, from the former Soviet Union. My parents moved around a lot for jobs, probably would get fired to go to another job, and then finally his English improved and, we'd find better jobs, as a lot of immigrants do. So when I grew up and, as an immigrant story, I went to law school, became a lawyer, became a judge. But in that process, I moved around a lot as well. And I kept hearing about this wonderful city, Portland, on the West Coast. A lot of people were talking about it, about how livable it was, how walkable it was, about the nature, all those things, which I think people that live here very much enjoy. So I came here on vacation, as many people do, stayed downtown, kept foot outside my hotel, went to Pioneer Place, and the March 4th marching band was playing there. And I was like, this is the best city I've lived in, even though I'd been living around the United States in California and Texas, Austin, and Washington, D.C. and some others. I fell in love with the city. I'm like, I gotta move here. So at that point in time, I was working as a judge, and I was managing a federal office, and there was an opening here to manage the Portland office. And I jumped on that opportunity. I visited the office. At that point in time, we were located downtown and loved the location, loved being so close to the river and being able to go out and walk around and jog outside and those things that I think a lot of people enjoyed and to some extent miss now. And so got transferred over here and then things sort of over time became more difficult for a lot of people. And so I tried to roll up our sleeves, and that led me to run for city council a couple of years ago because I felt that my opponent, who was at that time on city council, was doing a bad job, and I wanted to help out in that sort of way and actually represent the voices that I was hearing on the streets in our neighborhoods. When I was running for city council, people were saying, city council's not doing enough about homelessness. City council's not doing enough about mental illness. City council's not doing enough about the drug addiction that we're seeing. And I'm like, wait a second, that's not even a city council function per se. That's the county. The county's responsible for those things. And so now I have the opportunity and the honor to run for the county commission because I feel that this is a prime time. This is a very important election to make a difference in people's lives, both the people that are unhoused, living in tents in the streets, but also the people in the neighborhoods that because of the dereliction of our city and county government have had to deal with the ramifications of bad decision-making and bad policy-making in the past. And so I'm very glad to be able to do this. I have the experience and certainly working with Revitalize Portland and other organizations, that coalition that will need to succeed at the county level. And it's not going to be easy. But that ability to work together to bring different constituents on board, to listen to people and have their voices heard, that's what's needed right now for the county. It's been very insular. It's not listening to people. It's not listening to people that have solutions, that are working in those solutions. And we need to change that. And as a lot of elections, it's about change versus status quo. And, this is another one of those elections where it's exactly the same thing. I'm running for that change to bring a new perspective onto the county commission. I'm running against a candidate that has been very much part of the status quo. And so I think it's a very important election, and I'm glad to be part of this podcast in order to be able to discuss those things.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you on. Now, talking about the dysfunction at the county level and the reasons for you running in this election, what's the current board doing, or in most cases not doing properly, in your opinion, that you think you could change?
Yeah, well, I mean, one is they're not working together with the city and the state in order to enact the kind of changes that we need to address our problems. You might recall that there was a time when Tina Kotek found an extra few $1,000,000 to distribute to the counties to address homelessness. But all she needed to do was understand what the counties were doing. And she ended up withholding the money that was meant to go to Multnomah County because she said she did not understand what the plan was.
Right.
And so right now we don't have 3 votes on the county commission to actually come up with a good plan to address the homelessness. And I'm talking about a good plan. In fact, a very simple plan. Washington County has been able to make a huge dent in their homeless population and to get them into shelters, to get them the help that they need. They've said that they've eradicated unsheltered homelessness in their county. To some extent they have. Clackamas County has done a tremendous job in improving the resources and getting people off the streets into the help that they need. And yet Multnomah County keeps on failing. So what are we doing differently from other cities that have been successful in addressing the needs that we're facing here, but also our sister counties that have been able to address those things? One is being able to work together. That's not happened in the county. Sharon Myron, whom I admire quite a bit, has pointed this out over time and time again, how information is not being shared, how they're not discussing the topics that's of relevance to their constituents, how there's a top-down approach rather than an up-down approach as to some of these issues and solutions, and how the county is now working with the city and the state in order to address these. In fact, I think at one point in time, she asked the state to take over our social services, our mental health and drug addiction services, because the county was failing so badly in that. Yeah. So, that's the very basics, is how to work together, how to implement plans that are working elsewhere rather than ideologically driven plans, and how to coordinate those efforts so that we're successful. Again, that's a failure on the ability to have those 3 votes that we need for practical changes. And so I'm running to be one of those 3 votes. Certainly, Julie Brim-Edwards has been an outspoken critic of the current way that things are being run at the county, and she needs some help. She's been reelected now at the primary. She needs 2 more votes to get things done. And if you like pragmatic, practical leadership, then that's what I'm running for, to be one of those 3 votes to get the things that we need to get done.
All right, Sharon's great. She had a great quote recently that we republished, basically ad-libbing a little. Drowning in money and more than they can effectively waste, I think was sort of along the lines of her quote. And when we talk about that, the county is responsible for the mental health treatments in the area. We're talking about they're responsible for the homelessness, some of the judicial system. How can we change how these monies are being not wasted, being put in the right services, and making sure that the taxpayers, who I think are really frustrated at this point, going, we need to see some traction for all this money that we're throwing at these problems. How do we change what's currently going on?
Yeah, and let me just say that they're likely frustrated. We have the highest tax rate in the country here in Multnomah County. I think New York has a higher tax rate if you're making more than $25 million. I'm certainly not in that tax range, so I'm paying the highest tax in the country here in Multnomah County, as many of your listeners are. So what are we getting for it? We have potholes in our streets. We have people living in our streets in tents that are suffering. We have public safety issues. Those very basic concepts that our government is supposed to provide, we're failing on, even though we're paying the most amount of money. And I think the homeless services tax that a lot of people are paying is per capita one of the highest tax rates in the country to address homelessness. I think it's the highest one. And yet we're doing the least amount for it. So what are we doing wrong? And it's not about the money. Some people will say, we just need more money. We just need to figure out how to get more funding streams to come along. Well, I mean, if it was just the money, then certainly things like Metro saying we need to roll back some of the homeless services funds to use for building low-cost housing and things like that would not even be countenanced. As Sharon had pointed out, we have more than enough money to address it. The latest funding is about $400 million for the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and we have, based on the point-in-time counts, about 5,000 people that are chronically homeless living in our streets, give or take. That's enough to put everybody into a nice apartment in the Pearl and have money left over. So it's not about the money. Now, what has happened to the money is a very good question, which I think is what you're asking about. And so I remember about a year ago sitting with the Revitalize Portland Coalition with their board and talking about, what needs to happen. We discussed having an audit of the Joint Office of Homeless Services. And I'm convinced that's still the way to go. About 100 people, I think, signed on board, sent a letter to Jessica Vega-Peterson, the chair of the county commission, saying, we'd like to have an audit of the Joint Office of Homeless Services. Doesn't seem like too much to ask. We're all paying a lot of money into it. We should know how the money is being spent. And if you go to their website right now, there's some yearly reports which have nice graphics and big fonts, but you can't tell how the money is being spent, what we're getting for the money, where the contracts are going, which contracts are being successful, which contracts are failing us. So we need to do that audit. To that point, when the county commission and Jessica Vega-Peterson decided to finally, after all these years, fund Bybee Lakes to a small extent. Bybee Lakes, which has been tremendously successful in helping people get off the streets into drug addiction treatment and then into jobs and housing. When they got the money, they were asked to open up your books and do an audit to make sure the money's being spent well. Well, they passed with flying colors. Right. But if they're being asked to do that audit, doesn't it make sense that we do that audit for everybody else as well? Yeah. So I fully believe, and that will be something that I will ask for in my first week in office, to do a full forensic and performance audit of the Joint Office of Homeless Services. We need to figure out how our money is being spent. We need to figure out how to optimize that money. We need to make sure that that money is being spent directly to getting people off the streets and into the services that they need, and that we're spending it effectively. That's going to be one of the main things that we need to get done. The other thing is, of course, there's a lot of service providers out there that are all working, but they're being siloed. Talking to them directly, talking to organizations that have represented them. I keep hearing that refrain over and over. It's not just our government bureaucracy that sometimes is siloed, but it's also the individuals and entities that contract with that are siloed. We need to make sure that they're working together better. But we don't know what that's like or how to make that happen until we know what's working, what's not, who's doing what, where the money is going. So that audit is very important. I think a lot of people realize that their taxes are not being spent well, and they want to be able to know that, and this ties into so many other things as well. We've had a lot of people leave Multnomah County for at least the last couple of years. We've seen more people leave than come in. We've seen the loss of jobs here. We've seen businesses leave. And one of the frustrations is, what are we getting for our money, and what are we getting for our taxes, and then make sure that we're effectively using people's money. So I think that that's going to be one of the key elements to success in the future for Multnomah County and Portland.
We're talking about money that is being spent. How about money that's not being spent? So the Oregon legislature, they passed House Bill 4002, which sort of rolled back Measure 110 from several years ago, now effectively recriminalizing open-air drug use. But the county still hasn't got on board with the treatment facilities that need to be provided in order to really make this successful. We had a conversation with Nathan Vasquez, and, part of it is obviously using the laws to effectively help with the recriminalization. But the other part is, well, where are the services on the back end? And the county is responsible for a lot of this, right? In terms of sobering centers, detox facilities, treatment centers, mental health. How do we get that ball rolling in terms of getting those treatment facilities up and running? And what's your vision on that?
Yeah. And that's going to really entail that public-private relationship, because, on the one aspect, our government has the funding. On the other aspect, where is that funding going? Are we getting the results that we need? And so part of it over the last few years is what you're talking about, that detox centers. Central City Concern ran one in Central East Side because of methamphetamine use. It became too violent even for them to handle, and they closed it down. So for those people that don't know the history about this, there was too much violence even for their staff, so they closed down that center. And guess what? All those people that were violent in this detox center are now on the streets, sometimes being violent as well toward passerbys, toward innocent bystanders. We hear that all the time. There was an incident that happened in my neighborhood not too long ago, where an individual with a drug addiction problem and perhaps mental illness as well tried to push somebody right in front of a Max train as it was rolling into the Max stop. And it was only due to the quick efforts of the driver, who saw an individual running, thought it was suspicious, put on the brakes, but halted the train bare feet away from killing that individual that was pushed on there. That is another symptom of the failure of our county to address these issues, is that we have the people with mental illness, drug addiction that sometimes act out violently on our streets instead of a detox center and places where they can be linked to services. So the detox center is coming. Shout out to the legislature and Rob Nose and some of these other individuals that have been able to shepherd in money for the county to build up a detox center. Now, where's that sense of urgency? So now we have the money for the detox center, but we need transitional housing. We need to work with the DA and all those individuals, perhaps even the judges, for a drug court to make sure that people stay in recovery, and what that would look like. And so that public-private relationship is, we have people like TMT developers and Manessa Sturgeon, who have actually decided to convert prime office space into transitional housing, where people can go into services that they need, and they can stay in that area as they transition into sobriety and get the kind of services that they need in order to get jobs and housing down the road. We need more of that. We need the county to work with a private partnership in order to make it happen. But guess what? I was at a meeting of organizations, some of whom are represented in Revitalize Portland. And the person that organized the meeting was a fundraiser, but a person was like, a lot of individuals here are willing to help open up their pocketbooks, do the kind of stuff we're talking about right now. Has the county reached out to any of you, asked you to help, asked you what your abilities are, asked you for input? Raise your hand if anybody's ever had the county talk to them about this kind of stuff. Not one hand went up, because it's the my way or the highway mentality right now that's failing us here in Multnomah County. So we need to build out those partnerships. We have a lot of open space available that we can use for transitional housing. We have, people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and help out. We have the ability to hire people and get volunteers from OHSU and some other organizations. But guess what? The county's not doing that right now. Once again, get the money, throw it out the door, hope it works. But there's not that coordination, and we need better coordination with both the private sector as well as finding ways to hire more service providers to help out with that, because the detox center will come online hopefully quicker rather than later, and once again, Julie Brim Edwards is out there fighting the good fight for that, but she needs support. And so once that detox center comes online, what do we do with that? How do we transition people into sobriety? And the other part of it is also that detox center is going to be used as a drop-off center as part of what you mentioned, House Bill 4002, which recriminalized drugs, but not as a means to put people in jail, but as a means to get people into service. What some of your listeners might not realize is it's up to the county commission to figure out how that will work. The legislature did this job. They said we can't have these open air drug markets and people smoking fentanyl out in our streets. We need to be able to get them off the streets into services and make sure that we have a carrot and stick approach to that. The carrot is we'll provide the services. The stick is if you receive those services and you have 3 opportunities in the process to receive those services, then we'll use the criminal justice system as a stick in order to make sure that you actually get the services you need to sober up and not cause harm to yourself and other people. Well, it's up to the county to determine what that would look like. And right now, what we're hearing from the county and what we're hearing from Nathan Vasquez as well, our EDA, is a reluctance to bring in everybody that's going to be a part of the answers and understand what their perspective is. At first, they didn't want Nathan to participate at all, and he had to basically shove his way through the door in order to have the new a newly elected district attorney to provide input on what he, as a newly elected district attorney, will have to do in order to address these issues. And so right now, it seems like that the county is wanting to sort of do a check the box approach, which is, okay, well, if you're smoking fentanyl in the streets and somebody comes up to you, a police officer, sheriff, whatever that might be, and says, well, you can't do that here. It's either I'm going to use the criminal justice system to get you in this person, or you can choose to do your services yourself. And if they choose to do those services, right now, the plan seems to be that all I have to do is just show up at this new detox center, say they show up, and then go right back out, and no accountability whatsoever, no follow-up whatsoever, and they can go back to their drug use and, once again, result in this tragic life and death situation that we have with playing our streets, where last year we had over 700 overdoses in Multnomah County. What we need to do is that accountability. So Nathan is out there saying that's what we need to do. We used to have great drug courts, judges that would be in charge of these drug courts to make sure that people were staying on the road to recovery. And so often people have been drug addicted. It's too easy to fall back into it. If you're back on the streets, you're back in a situation where you have people tempting you, you're back in a situation where there's drug dealers around you, you might relapse. What we need to do is ensure that people are staying on the road to recovery. And that detox center is going to be key to that. It can't be just a drop-off center where people can walk in and then walk right back out. And we need to make sure that people are in that system and that they're getting the services that they need, and more than that, that they stay in those services. And I think that there's a lot of people that want that to happen. The legislature has said that that was their intent, but the counties, once again, my way or the highway, the county is intent on sort of doing the check the box thing and letting things go the way they are. And we can't have any more of that. Too many lives are at stake, and make sure that there's changes and people are held accountable.
Revitalize Portland Coalition has been advocating for the civil compromise, drug diversion programs. There are some drug courts, as you mentioned, King County in Seattle, Marion County here in Oregon have been implementing those and been having success and some traction on them. How do we get to that point where we can start implementing that back again? And has the county considered working with the chief of police, Bob Day, to get this drug diversion program going in Multnomah County?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just Chief Day who's doing a wonderful job. And thanks for him for coming back. I think he was working as a referee or something, enjoying his retirement, but then was called back for the services that are deeply needed here in Portland. But it's also the judges. The county works with the chief criminal judge in order to come up with these policies that we're seeing right now. So when you're talking about, this revolving door that we see in the jails, where sometimes drug dealers are getting arrested, but then they're right back on the street, sometimes to the very same corner. The county is tasked with making sure that we have good policies, working with the judges to make sure that bad people that are victimizing others are kept in jail and not back out in the streets. And likewise, good people that just need a little bit of help. I'm a progressive like everybody else. We believe that in the goodness of people, we believe that we need to help people that sometimes can't help themselves. Those people need the help to stay in the system and get sobriety and the mental health services that they need. So there's an organization called the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council that is part of developing some of these long-term policies around public safety and otherwise. And Chief Day is on it, but he's not one of the executive board members for that. For that matter, the sheriff is on that organization. She's not one of the executive. The chief criminal judge is on that organization. They're not part of the executive board members. I believe Renee Gonzalez is still the representative from the city. Used to be the mayor, but right now it's Commissioner Gonzalez. But he's not an executive board member. And as an executive board member, you set the policies, you set the agenda. So we need to make sure it opens up to the people that are instrumental in making sure that we have success here. And that includes the public safety apparatus, that includes the police, that includes the sheriff's office, because they're deeply involved in day-to-day walking the streets and making sure that people not only don't victimize other people and there's repercussions to committing crimes, but also the people that need help are funneled into that system. But also the judges. And so on the county commission, I will sit down with the judge. I'm a judge myself. I'm not a criminal judge. I work for a federal agency as an administrative law judge, but I also know what it's like to work within a legal framework. And so we need to sit down with the judges. What is the best way to get people the services they need? I'm not talking about just drug addiction right now. They're encountering a lot of people with mental illness, very serious mental illness, that are living on the streets, that are not getting treatment, that are not getting medication, that sometimes become violent and hurt people, sometimes kill people, unfortunately. And once again, it's those judges that have to deal with it. But the county is responsible to address those those problems that lead people to commit crimes, and that's where we're seeing the failure of that coordination piece, both with the criminal justice system, the judges, and also the infrastructure to get people the help that they need before they commit those crimes.
Speaking of judges and judgment, Supreme Court, you probably have your finger on the pulse of this one. The Supreme Court recently ruled on the Grants Pass case, giving a new reassessment to that Boise ruling that was requiring shelter beds for camping sweeps and so forth. And it basically sent a lot of shockwaves right through the system so far. How do you think that's going to affect our position on tent sweeps, shelter beds, and so forth? What do you feel on that case ruling?
Yeah, it's instrumental, and that has been a talking point of mine ever since I ran for office, that this is coming our way. So House Bill 4002, that was coming our way. We have it now. So there's a way to address people that are selling drugs and openly using drugs in our streets, in our neighborhoods. So we have that. We have, an arrow in our quiver to address these issues. Another arrow in our quiver is certainly a change to the Grants Pass decision. And honestly, there were things we could have done which we didn't do, and that becomes a philosophy issue with the county and an ideology about how things should run. But there were some things we could have done before that were not done to address the camping that's been going on, the unsanctioned camping. But now we have, more avenues to address it. And so the city can do lots of things. Certainly there's a sit-lie ordinance, which I would love to hear what my opponent has to say about that, because I think it's part of her organization. They've been pretty content about people camping out in the streets, but we need to have, once again, a care and stick approach. We'll give you the services, we'll get you housing, we'll get you drug addiction, mental illness services, but you cannot remain in the streets where you're being victimized by other people and sometimes victimizing innocent people along the way. So now the Grants Pass decision has been changed, and it's right back up to the city, the county, and the state to embrace that and what that would look like. I actually was speaking to someone who's a service provider this morning who works with homeless people day in and day out. And their concern right now is that we don't do anything that's different. We keep on doing what we've been doing right now, while our neighboring states, California and Washington, make the changes. So as you may know, Governor Newsom from California was one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit that has went to the Supreme Court. So they wanted the changes that the Supreme Court has now allowed, which has given them broader discretion to address unsanctioned camping, and more than that, people who choose camping over shelter. That's of course one of the questions we have to ask. Is this who out there when they have that choice to go into shelters is refusing that, and what can we do about that? And there are, according to our own mayor, quite a large proportion of people that just do not want to get off the streets. So now we have those avenues. But what will we do with that? Because California, Governor Newsom, he wants to make those changes. So does that mean we'll get more homeless people coming here from California because they're now instituting policies there which are not conducive to street camping anymore? Same thing for Washington. If Seattle starts embracing that Supreme Court decision, well, people start coming here. And from our own point in time counts, roughly about half the people that are homeless in Portland and Multnomah County were homeless already before they came to our county. So how much is that going to change things here? And we need to have a county that's actually going to likewise embrace these changes and make sure that camping in our streets is not the default. that we need to build up shelters, that we need to build up safe rest villages and essentially campsites and places where people can go to receive those services, but not on a street corner, not places where they're going to be victimized. Certainly the drug addiction, drug dealing is in the streets, human trafficking, prostitution that arises from some of those things, and then the violence that comes from time to time as well from living in our streets. We can't allow people to suffer anymore, and we can't allow our neighborhoods to have to address the issues that our county has failed to address. So now we have those avenues. We have another quiver to address some of these things. We have to embrace it, and that starts with both the county, that goes to the state. There might need to be some changes to our laws as to what is possible. Our city has already done its part in passing some of these in-law statutes that's saying if you're offered a place to go and you refuse, once again, if you're offered a place to go and you refuse, that is now, again, a criminal penalty as it was before. And anybody that says that it's a person's right to camp on the streets is trying to sell you something, because we have too many people dying. We have too many people that are suffering. And we have to stop it right now. We have to utilize the resources that our legislature, our United States Supreme Court has allowed us to utilize at this point in time, that our neighboring states have fought for in order to address these issues.
So the other question, or the other side of this coin, is, and Multnomah County has been pushing really hard on this housing first principle, right? And priority funding to more affordable housing being built, in a way sort of disincentivizing private development. And we can talk about that a little bit as well. What's your take on the housing first doctrine? And do you agree with it? Or what should be changed in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, it's failed us, right? I mean, there's no question about it. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars, not close to $1 billion, on building out low-cost housing. Bonds that have been passed over the last few years that taxpayers are paying for. And yet our unhoused population keeps growing. Cost of living keeps growing. More and more people are forced into dire situations and having to pay more for their housing, the ones that have jobs. And of course, the ones that are living in our streets are still living in our streets. And what we know is that the current policies around housing first have failed us here in Multnomah County. So to give you an example of one of our failures here, there's a program called Housing Multnomah Now. It's in its second year at this point in time. But in our first year, the county chair said, okay, well, I'm going to dedicate $14 million to getting people directly off the streets and into apartments. And they went out to some landlords and they said, hey, we'll indemnify you if they cause any damage. We'll pay for that damage. We'll pay you market rate for your apartments, which means not Section 8 housing, below market rate rent for any kind of housing. We'll pay you whatever you would charge anybody else that would go and try to get an apartment from you out of that $14 million fund. Well, in that first year, they set up a table next to the Burnside Bridge. There were people camping around there, actually digging underneath the bridge at times. The city wanted to move them. The county said, no, we got this. We got it. We got $14 million. We got this table here. We got a computer. We'll get them into housing. Well, after our first year, out of that $14 million at their disposal, they got 37 people. Now we're in our second year, so they've kind of fast forwarded that a little bit. And so now there's more people in the housing, but I did the math, and we're basically paying $100,000 to get people from the streets and into an apartment, $100,000 per person per year. Now, I don't know if you check the cost of apartments here in Portland, and it's expensive, but it's not $100,000 per person. So money's being wasted. So what we're seeing right now is, it's not about the money. The difficulty is you can't take people who have very serious drug addiction, mental health problems, and just stick them in an apartment. It's not going to work. It's not going to work for them. It's not going to work for society as a whole. And that's what failed us that first year, where there was a lot of money to go around and still an inability to do that. Part of it is broken bureaucracy, bad policy planning, not involving those people. But guess what? Talking to developers in the city, they're like, we can build apartments for these people, $200, $300 a square foot.
Right.
And so just do the math, of the money that we have, $200, $300 per square foot, apartments, how much that would cost. We can house the vast majority of the people that are living in our streets with the money that we have. And instead, because of our bureaucracy, we're paying $1,200 a square foot, sometimes even more, for the kind of housing that we get. So we need to get people on board. Once again, that private-public relationship. I'm very happy to have been endorsed by the Revitalize Portland Coalition, because I believe in the ability of people to work together. There's some people that say it's us versus them. It's renters versus landlords. Developers are bad people. These other people, they're trying to divide the city. We need to bring people together rather than divide the people. And if you're a developer and you're able to build this stuff for cheap, that's exactly what we need. We need to build places where people can go, where it's not on the streets. We need to build it out so our rents will go down, so it's not expensive for people that are working 9 to 5 jobs, sometimes 2 to 3 jobs, and are having a hard time affording it. And we need to make sure it works for everybody, including unhoused and housed people. And the way to do that is through that public-private relationship. We know that there's people that can do it for much less. But guess what? That room I was in where they're like, "Has anybody come out to you and asked you what you can do?" and no hand went up. There's a reason for that. We need to make sure there's accountability and we use the money wisely. And that's why I'm running for office. That's why I'm very happy to work with Revitalize Portland as a partner to make sure that we get that accountability and we get the best use for our money.
Our chairman, Gordon Schnitzer, has made that same comment time and time again. Why don't they reach out to the private sector? There are people who do this for a living that are much more competent at building housing, at, example, Bybee Lakes, sheltering people, helping them through the process. And so I guess for a lot of people, there's this frustration. We're throwing so much money at it, but nothing is really going the way that it should. And, you had mentioned it before. A lot of the people that are in the county want this sort of status quo, which, if I remember right, is sort of the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same things over and expecting a different result. So,
and paying more money for it too.
And pay more money for it. Exactly. And so why this resistance, in your opinion, from the county? Is it hubris? Is it pride? Is it disdain for others? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what is the mentality, because like you said, there's a room full of people that want to help solve these problems, and they're better at it than the county is. So why not reach out to these people? What's the resistance?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is ideology. We see it time and time again where there's a belief that is not working, but there's a reticence to change that. And you can go to the psychology of all that, and there's books that have been written about that, as to some of these overarching issues that we're encountering here. But also there's that bureaucracy. Something happens, power corrupts, and complete power corrupts completely. There's that saying. Well, we're seeing it work out here.
Yeah.
At our county level, we have complete power over a lot of money, a lot of disposable income, and that money is just not being used wisely. And so, that's why my hat's in the ring, because we need to make sure that there's accountability where we have rational voices asking questions. We talked a little bit about Commissioner Sharon Myron and some of the things that she said recently, but she's asking those tough questions. And guess what? She's being sidelined by the chair of the county commission, because for a long time now, no one's been asking those questions. And so we need to make sure that we have that verification. And so that's part of it, is that there's just been this long-term reticence of working together. And so my campaign has been about building that coalition. If you go to my website, votevadim.com, not only do I have, endorsements from Revitalize Portland, but also from unions. Also from public sector unions. The Fire Bureau has endorsed me. Also from people running nonprofit organizations, including people providing shelter space for the homeless. But guess what? Those nonprofit organizations are not being funded by the county. But they also know that that's why the system is broken, because the things that work sometimes don't get funded. The county has not only wanted to do housing first, but also no high barrier shelter, which means if you have a shelter that's saying, well, you can stay here, but you have to have drug addiction treatment, the county won't fund you. Why? It's working. It's certainly working at Bybee Lakes. and they haven't been funded until very recently, and even that to a small amount, because the ideology is if people want to be able to use drugs, even at a sheltered place, they should be allowed to do that. Too many people have died. That ideology is wrong.
Right.
And that ideology is what's driving us right now, and that bureaucracy. And there's people out there that are trying to provide input on how to change that bureaucracy. And so, I'm certainly working with individuals that have had those conversations about how to bring, common sense business practices to our county, including accountability, including making sure we have plans and policies that work, and we have reviewed those policies. If something doesn't work, we have to be able to change it. And I'm fully behind that. We have to have a system in place that is able to change based on, both what works and what doesn't work, and the failures, and recognize that there are failures in place. And so I think that, part of this is, once again, it can't be just Sharon Myron saying, canary in the coal mine and saying, okay, this is not working. We need to have those 3 votes in the county commission in order to hold people accountable, and making sure that there's a balance on what's going on, and a set of eyes on what the policies are. And so that's, when I'm in office, I'll be one of those 3 people, making sure that things are transparent, making sure that the money is being spent well, and making sure that we're not ideology driven, but we're driven by what works, what's practical, what helps people, rather than what in the past has been a promises to help people, but in reality has been a complete failure.
If we're assuming you get elected, and we absolutely believe that you will. Julie Bird's on your side, sort of starting to ask those tough questions, and doing the hard work. The other 2, who would you like to see there to be pushing back and helping and changing the direction?
Vincent Jones, I'm very happy that he got elected. I think by something like 60 votes. So I'm glad his family voted for him. They put him over the top. And it was a very close election, but he's there, and certainly he's endorsed my campaign. I endorsed that before he won as well. And I think he'll be an asset there. He's certainly done a good working Gresham. And then, the question becomes the 2 elections that are still ongoing. And both myself and Sam Adams are kind of facing the same campaign. It's people who are there that have been working on these issues, that have been able to bring coalitions together to find solutions, have been, knocking on doors, as the doors don't open, pushing the doors open and to get things done, versus the status quo candidates. So in Sam's race, it's Shannon Singleton. In my race, it's Megan. And both of them come from the nonprofit sector, from public sector, from organizations that have benefited from the status quo. And it's time for a change. We can't have more advocates. Now, we need to have advocates out there, but we can't have more advocates on our county commission. We need to have people that are able to balance the needs, that are able to be open to hearing, both from the advocates as well as people that are having experiences and have knowledge and are working on some of these issues that are not advocacy driven as well, and being able to weigh in what is the best thing, not just more money, but how do we utilize that money effectively. And so, I think Sam Adams has a really tough fight on his hands up there in the county district too. But we're both in the same sort of situation where we're fighting for change, and we're hoping enough people hear about what the issues are and understand that need for change, because both of our opponents have this constellation of organizations that have honestly benefited from the status quo, and they're pouring money into their campaigns. But if you want change, if you want accountability, if you want people to embrace what our legislature has produced, what the Supreme Court has allowed us, what other states are about to do in order to address the human suffering that we have in our streets, then yeah, you need to vote for that change, which is myself and Sam Adams.
Vadim, you are currently the president of the Goose Hollow Association. You've been there for a while, been tackling some issues in that neighborhood. How do you feel that experience is going to help you on the Board of Commissioners side?
Mhm. And I think it's tremendous to talk about experience as general. I'm the only candidate that's running for office in my district for the county commission that has had that experience working with neighbors throughout Portland and Multnomah County on the issues that are top line for most people, drug addiction, mental illness, homelessness, and public safety. And it started with the neighborhood associations. I joined my neighborhood association, as so many people did, volunteer their time to make a difference. And then, became the president over time of my neighborhood association. And we were out there addressing some of the homelessness issues, both in, when the county closed down its shelters early in the midst of an ice storm. We had people that were trying to find ways to get people into some sort of housing that were left out there in the cold. You learn the success stories people are having and the frustration of not being able to do more. I'm also the president of a coalition of neighborhood associations. So up until recently, it was Neighbors West Northwest, which is a coalition of 12 neighborhood associations. Now it's a District 4 coalition, which will be a coalition of about 31 neighborhood associations on the west and inner southeast. And there's a lot of people doing good work. As we speak right now, we're working with a consortium of organizations, people that are working in addressing homelessness. Once again, not funded by the county, but are in the shelter system. People like Homer Williams, who's a developer and has done quite a bit to build up the Pearl and other things, but has since devoted a lot of time and effort for a transition center, getting people off the streets and into the care that they need, and also working to get people into housing that might have difficulties, so elderly and things like that, working out a system to get people who might lose a house or who can't pay rent anymore. That starts with a neighborhood association system because we're working with those organizations. An organization that my neighborhood works with is called Loving One Another. It's a nonprofit, and they actually have a van. They go around and they talk to homeless people in mental health crisis, drug addiction crisis, and try to help them off the streets. We work with them because they are able to find places, shelters or otherwise, for people to go when they're ready to go to those shelters. And it's a very difficult thing. If you are homeless right now, then you wake up in the morning, you're like, I want to go to a shelter. Well, guess what? There's no easy way to do it. You can't even go online and see where there's availability. You have to call 311. They'll give you a bunch of phone numbers for shelters. You have to call around for the shelters and see who has availability, make a reservation for that shelter space, which may be available now. Most days, about 20% of the shelter spaces are open, but maybe down the road. Then you have to get a ticket. You have to go to Old Town and catch a bus to get to that shelter. It's not an easy process by any means. We're making it actually very hard for people that are living on the streets to get in shelter. Well, Loving One Another does that work. They find out where there's shelter spaces available. They get in a van, they drive around, they see somebody that may need some help. So I joined with them one day. I went on a ride along. So I got in that van with other service providers. And this was a cold day. It was in the wintertime. It was raining outside. They were driving, started off in the Pearl area, but then ended up being downtown over by Director Park. There was a person that was out there, a woman in the rain, in the cold, barefoot. Her pants were rolled up to her knees. For some reason, she was barefoot out there, did not have rain clothing on, and she was just out sitting in the streets. So they pulled over, and there was an alcove where there were 3 people smoking fentanyl. We saw the fentanyl supplies there. 2 of them ran off, but they were also talking to that woman, so there might be some drug use involved. I'm not really sure what happened there, but she was in a mental crisis. So they stepped out, and they calmed her down. They spoke with her a little bit, try to, form a relationship to get her to accept services. And then I said, well, we'll get you to the Blanchet House. Looks like you're wet. Looks like you're cold. Looks like you're not shoes. Let's get you to the Blanchet House. And Scott Kerman has done an excellent job over there at Blanchet House. So that I've worked with him in the past on issues. He's been advocating for some changes that are necessary, including getting people with mental illness the treatment that they need, that they have a very difficult time addressing in their space. But we offered to get her to place where she can get food and clothing and a little bit of warmth. And then there was a place for a shelter. So then not only would she be able to go and get food and clothing and shoes and warmth, but also there was a shelter spot available for her that evening. So all we asked was, would you like a taxi for us to take you to Blanchet House? Because in the van, they're not allowed to take it directly, but using a taxi service, they are. Well, after a while, she agreed. She's like, that sounds good. Warm food, a little bit of warmth, and dry, as well as clothing and a place for shelter. Well, guess what? The taxi took her to Blanchet House, and she didn't even walk in. She just left. That's what we're dealing with right now. That's the scourge of drugs and mental illness in our streets. People are not doing what they need to do in order to survive and be able to deal with their situations because they're being pulled back by fentanyl, which is a very strong drug, sometimes methamphetamines as well. And that's what we're dealing with. And there are people that are out there trying to help, but guess what? Loving one another is not funded by the county. And talking to them, they're like, we're out there, we're driving around, we're trying to help. We're not seeing anybody else out there. These outreach workers, what we need to do is build those coalitions once again, working all together to solve a problem.
Vadim, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for being thoughtful, pragmatic, articulate. We need more commissioners just like you, especially ones that are willing to work with the private sector, as we've been stating. So thanks so much for your time being on the Revive and Thrive podcast. We appreciate it.
Likewise, I very much appreciate it, Michael. It's been a pleasure. Great questions. And I look forward to keeping these conversations going and actually enacting some of these changes that we need at the county level going forward. Thanks, everybody, to listen to this podcast. Please share it with as many people as you can. Take care, everybody.
All right.